Welcome back to another episode of the Self-Respect Revolution podcast. My name is Dr. Katherine, and I'm so excited to dive into episode 3 with you because if you would have listened to episode 2, which I hope you did, at the very end I said I was going to share a topic that was so important to me that I got it tattooed on my arm. So I'd love to dive right into that story. So what I got tattooed on my arm is a quote. If you're watching this, you can see it sort of on the inside of my left forearm. And it says, "To thine own self be true, love Dad." So I actually got my dad to write this quote 10 times. He has horrible writing, so we barely got one legible one out. And I took it to the beautiful tattoo artist who replicated it to a T. So I now have my amazing father who's always with me on my arm. Now, why this quote? Well, I can't even remember the first time he told me this quote. It would have been at least 2 decades ago. And you know, when you're young, you're sort of like blow off your parents. You're like, you're weird. I don't understand you. And he would repeat this quote now and again over the past sort of 2 decades. And it started to make more and more sense. And it comes from Hamlet, where a character, Polonius, I believe his name is, was speaking to his son, who was about to go off in the world. Basically, what he was trying to say to his son is, hey, you know what? There's going to be a lot of hoopla. You're going to meet a lot of people. There's going to be good people. There's going to be bad people. You're going to be thrown a lot of things. But just be true to yourself, because when you can be honest with yourself and true to yourself, you can therefore be honest with others. This really resonated with me about a year ago, and I only got it tattooed about 3 months ago because tattoos kind of are long-lasting, so I needed to think about it. But it really started to resonate about a year plus ago. It was just not a happy time in my life. And I would go to work and I'm like, I just don't feel like myself. And I was working with 2 beautiful ladies, and they could see this sort of decline where I just started to get a bit more short, and I just wasn't happy. I wasn't myself. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't laughing. I was cracking bad jokes, as I always did. And one of them said to me, like, why don't you take a break? And I was like, oh, that's so funny. I don't take breaks. I mean, even on the weekend, I go to the office, right? But, she kept on pushing. And I said, well, how about this? I'm going to go to a psych just to bounce off. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something under the surface. And I went to a psychologist, and one of the first things she said was, you're burnt out, you need time off. And I'm like, I'm a mindset expert. I don't get burned out. I know everything. Like ego, ego, ego. And so she kept on like gently pushing. And then about 20 minutes in, I was like, yeah, I'm burnt out. At the very end, we agreed that I would take the rest of the afternoon off. So on the way home, I remember seeing the sign, something along the lines of follow your path, follow your purpose. It was like a university sign. I was like, that's weird. And then I saw another one that said basically the same thing. I was like, okay, clearly the universe is trying to tell me something, but I'm just going to ignore it because it's too hard. I just don't want to think about that. So I got home, took the rest of the afternoon, and I think within an hour, it hit me. Wow, this is burnout. You start to reflect and you really start to think, what is going on here? And really what it came down to was I was not being true to myself at all. Now, the rest of the story is a bit long and complex, which went from quitting everything to stepping in as CEO of a technology company that I co-founded several years ago along with my partner. And that did not go well at all for various reasons. So then I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Maybe I'll start a dog company. And I was so lost. But the amazing thing about that experience is I think I'm a professional when it comes to thine own self. I was not true. I know all the signs and symptoms of when you're not being true to yourself. And I think it's so important that we recognize these because that was a really, really horrible time for me. And I don't want you to go through this. Or if you do go through this, I wanted to be a heck of a lot shorter than what I went through because it just sucked. So let's now dive into the top 10 signs that you're not being true to yourself. So number 1, you're constantly telling yourself, I should just be grateful for what I have. And I'm very fortunate. I mean, I hate saying this, but it's absolutely true. I'm white privileged. I'm educated. I come from a very loving family who's always supported me. I have amazing friends. And this is what I kept on thinking over and over again. I'm like, why am I thinking the way that I'm thinking? Because I shouldn't be thinking this way. I should be grateful. I should be practicing gratitude. I should be like out in a friggin' field somewhere with like cows mooing and saying kumbaya and shit, because there's no reason for me to complain. But it reminded me of this story of a flea. The story of the flea is this. So it was a little girl that captured a flea and wanted to keep it as a pet. So the little girl puts it in a jar and puts on the lid, puts little air holes in it. And the flea's like, well, this sucks. So for the first couple of days, the flea is constantly trying to jump out. So it would jump with all its might and it would hit the lid. Ow, gosh, that hurts. Well, let's try again. Ooh, ouch, that hurts. And it would do this over and over again. And it eventually just said well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to be here in this jar. And I should just be happy with just being in this jar. So you get into this place of learned helplessness. And I think when you're there, and this is obviously a different sort of concept of learned helplessness, but I think that's what I was experiencing. It was less about being grateful for what I had and more about not recognizing that I was setting myself up for failure. I was only thinking about all the things that I could have, or I should be doing, or I should have achieved. And it got me in this mindset where I was just scared to be myself because it just wasn't working. It was like that flea that was jumping and hitting the ceiling. I was like, well, clearly I thought I was being myself and that didn't go well. So maybe there's something wrong with me. So I think one of the first signs to really recognize is when it maybe poses as, hey, you should be grateful for what you have. But the question that I sort of pose to you is it really masking this thought of almost learned helplessness where you're putting yourself in this position where it's almost like, woe is me? Number 2, you are experiencing a mixture of rage, fear, and anger. Now, I did a post today about rejection. What I see online is, I don't want to say this, but a lot of fluff. Positivity and compassion and showing yourself grace. So when I was in this, I'm going to quit everything. I can't be me because it's not working. Who am I? This existential crisis. I was like, okay, I'm going to journal a bit. I went to Kmart because Kmart's fabulous. Let's just be honest here. And I got myself a pretty journal and a pretty pen, even though I have 6,000 pens. I'm like, no, I'm clearly for this exercise, I need a new pen. So I got the pen, made myself a cup of tea, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit outside in the fresh air and do journaling and be so cool, right? So I started writing. First sentence was something along the lines of how do I feel right now? And what happened was a satanic rage where I felt like a psychopath. It was this whole fire and lava was coming out of me, and I was just full of hatred. And I was those horror movies when the person is going crazy and then they're just scribbling all gibberish all over the walls? That was me. And then I start yelling it. I'm like, F, F, F. I hate you. And I hate life. And I was a mad woman. So I'm like, this is definitely not Instagrammable. So I don't know about you, but when I don't feel like myself, I don't really feel sadness. I don't really feel low. I feel this mixture of rage, fear, and anger. So the rage and anger is because I'm mad at myself, but we're going to get to how that disguises in just a little bit. So the rage about Why am I this quote unquote intelligent person that cannot figure out her life, that can't feel like herself and feel like those successful people on like Forbes and like the hashtag success business chicks and this? I'm like, who am I? Why am I like this? So that's like that rage and anger. But the fear is pure. If I don't figure out who I actually am, that means I'm never going to actually be successful, because you can't be successful if you're pretending to be someone else. It doesn't work that way. You cannot be successful if you're pretending to be someone else. I know this because I tried for a long time. It don't work. Number 3, you are feeling resentful. And the reason why I quickly went into that one, because they're so intertwined. That fear, that rage, that anger, and resentment weave together like peas and carrots. Little Forrest Gump for you, peas and carrots. What happened is, you know how I was saying about like that anger and rage? Really, it was about myself, but it started as resentment. Resentment to all the people that were quote unquote involved. Like, how could you let me get to this point? So what I found in that period of sort of resentment was like, why am I talking about things like productivity and focus? Why am I talking about stress? Why am I talking about like physiological pathways? I'm interested in it, but I have no passion for it. So when I was thinking about like looking at all the content that I had developed, I'm like, who the F was that? Like, why did I let myself get to that point of not talking from my heart? Why? And so I went and did this whole thing of, well, clearly that couldn't have been my fault, because I wouldn't have let myself ego. So you get to this point of resentment, resenting others, but it has nothing to do with them. When you're being true to yourself, that is no one's responsibility but yours. Let me tell you, it feels really good to blame others. Don't get me wrong about that. But the trick is to understand the only person that can really figure yourself out is you. That was deep. That was actually really deep. So symptom number 4, you find yourself people-pleasing. So people-pleasing is a massively hot term nowadays. So I just want to break it down a bit, because I don't actually really resonate with the concept of people-pleasing. When you were a kid and you did something wrong and your parents would say something like, "I'm so disappointed in you," to me is my version of people-pleasing. I think one of the things that I realize is when I'm not true to myself, this really overwhelms me. I'm constantly 24/7 thinking about all the people I have disappointed, I am disappointing, or catastrophizing, thinking about all the people that I will disappoint. I don't think about myself. I think about, oh my God, I'm going to be disappointing so many people. And one of the things that I realized through this whole process is actually I was just disappointing myself. But you just think, well, who cares about you? You're nobody. You're not important, right? We care so much about disappointing others. Why do we not think about disappointing ourselves? And I think on that same vein from people-pleasing, we can go right into number 5, which is you find yourself not speaking up, not really saying what you really think, or you find yourself carefully choosing every single word that you speak. One of the things that I find as a step-parent, as a step-mom, which, by the way, is really freaking confusing. I wish there was a guidebook. I actually said to my stepdaughter the other day, I just want to let you know, I have no idea what I'm doing right now, and I just hope I don't put you in therapy. So I find myself when I'm talking to my partner, his name is Vlado, as soon as I'm about to say something about that, like make a suggestion for the kids, I can find myself like literally thinking, should I say the or should I say to? Like it's every single word I'm worried about, because I'm so concerned about what if he doesn't like what I have to say. And this is my partner of more than 10 years who has seen me at my worst. And when I say at my worst, like buck naked, who had a very bad stomach flu. So you can just, draw the picture for your own conclusion there. It's interesting that I've been through that with him. But then when it comes to this, like certain situations, you're like, can I really be true to myself? Can I really be true to my beliefs, my thoughts, my values, my suggestions? It's really hard. So that's one of the major signs for me that I start picking up on. And it's not just with him. It could be like with a friend. It could be with, someone that I'm working with. It could be with a potential client. All of a sudden, I'm like, I go almost into the shell and I'm trying to like rub a crystal ball and say, okay, if I say this, I wonder what's going to happen. But this is something that I'm really catching myself and calling myself out on, because at the end of the day, when I'm one foot in the coffin, I would hate to look back at my life and say, I wish I would have said that, because that's really, really what I believed. All right, let's move to number 6. You're finding it hard to make difficult decisions. The reason why I found it really hard to make a difficult decision is because I was waiting for the perfect solution. Because when I had the perfect solution, that meant that I was perfect. So when I was thinking about this whole thing about, finding it difficult to make decisions, it actually just reminded me of a very basic physiological principle. So if you think about the nervous system, which is your brain, spinal cord, and all the connections that go away from it and back to it, the main jobs of the nervous system is twofold. 1, to avoid pain. 2, to seek pleasure. And obviously we want to avoid pain because we don't want to die. And pleasure is reproduction and obviously eating, especially when it involves vanilla slice, clearly. I have 10 plus years in physiology. Like, I knew this. But when you're in that whole situation, when you feel like a turtle in a shell and you're just hiding, you're so scared to make a decision. I was just trying to avoid pain. Like, it actually was really normal. So one thing to consider, if you're feeling, when you say to your friend, like, I just don't feel like myself, ask yourself, are you also finding it hard to make a difficult decision? And ask yourself, okay, why is that? If you really siphon it down, it's because your brain is saying, this is yucky, you need to avoid the discomfort and pain of making a decision. And I think once you realize that, you can hack it. Number 7, you're over-reliant on external validation. When I'm at networking, this is where it really hits home for me. So if I'm at networking, you get the whole name tag, and oftentimes it has Dr. Katherine Isco. I'm like, ooh, that feels good for the ego. Yes, indeedy. So the conversation goes something like this. Oh, Dr. Katherine, what are you a doctor of? I said, oh, well, I have a PhD in biotechnology and physiology. I worked with patients with type 1 diabetes, yada, 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 yada. So the first thing that they usually say is, oh, so you're not a real doctor. Yeah, that's pause if you're listening right now, because that is a resting bitch face. So that doesn't really feel that great. That is the opposite of external validation. The second thing that they say is, oh, but aren't you like a keynote speaker, and don't you do like motivational and like inspiring talks and stuff? Like, what does that have to do with your PhD? And that's when I think, wow, total turtle shelling. And that's a funny thing. When I got my PhD, I'm just thinking back, I remember in my office at the university, they changed my nameplate over from Katherine Isco, PhD candidate or whatever it was, to Dr. Katherine Isco. And I remember taking a photo of it and putting it on Facebook. Why? Was I proud of it? Sure, of course. I was somewhat proud of it, I guess. But the only reason why I was doing that is putting up that goddamn picture so I would get likes. Because I didn't feel like I was myself unless someone said, oh yeah, hey, you're awesome, you're a doctor. At the time, when I did get that PhD, did I feel like a PhD? No, I can tell you with a shadow of a doubt, when I was walking across that stage, I was thinking, I do not belong here. I'm such a fraud. you just walk around thinking, someone is going to figure me out. You're like this monkey swinging through branches, just looking validation, validation, validation. And you just keep on swinging because you're so scared about someone figuring you out. So sign number 7, if you're finding yourself, just not feeling yourself and overly reliant on external validation, one of the things to ask yourself is, are you that monkey swinging from branch to branch to branch, looking for validation? Why not challenge yourself to get off that branch, land your feet right on the ground, and ask yourself, what could I do to be myself and actually like myself? Sounds like such a simple question, doesn't it? Such a simple question, but let me tell you, 45 years, and I'm just kind of figuring that out. Number 8, you're lacking spark, enthusiasm, drive, because you're not pursuing the things that really make you feel like make you feel amazing. And I'll give you an example of this and why it makes such a difference. So this was about 3,000 years ago when I was working with clients who wanted to lose weight. And I'll always remember this, such a beautiful lady who wanted to lose some weight, and we did a lot of work together, and she was just not happy with her job. And I remember finally getting to know her, and she says, what I really like to do is I really like to build tetrariums. What do you call it? Tetrariums? I can never say that word. When you get like the glass jar and you put a whole bunch of succulents in and you have like the layered thing and then you put the lid on. However you say that word is what she really loved to do. And so what we found was when she was in that job that she really, really didn't like at all, she would skip the gym, go home, get takeout on the way, and then just sit in front of the TV, eat, stay up too late, wake up, be tired, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And when I challenged her to say, what, don't worry about the gym. Cancel your gym membership if you want. What I'd like you to do is challenge yourself to get all your supplies, get whatever it is you need to do the tetrarium thing at home. Lo and behold, for the next month, I saw a totally different person. We're talking sparkola in her eyes. The way she stood was different. The way she presented herself was different. I'm like, that's you. I see you. Finally, that is you. And what we discovered together is that she was so concerned with all the things that we've been talking about today, people pleasing, not being yourself, yada, 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 yada. She was so concerned about following the typical trajectory of one's life, which is 9 to 5, get your retirement. And she was so scared to make that hard decision to leave her job and follow her passion, because what if it didn't work out? But she did. And I don't know if you've seen like on Etsy or out there, like tetrariums are like going to be the next Fortune 500 company. Like she was killing it. So what I would again challenge you is ask yourself, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being you are passionate like a Latin lover, like you could not feel any more passion, versus 1 is like, I feel numb, I feel nothing. What would that number be? Are you being true to yourself? Number 9, you are drawn to drama. And I think this is for the very, very simple reason is because it distracts you from dealing with whatever you want to deal with. I mean, that's like why we like smut TV and like, reality TV. We are drawn to drama because it helps us forget about the fact that we have to sort out our problems. It's numbing. It really is numbing. And I think the other reason why is when we are looking at someone else's problems, we're like, maybe we're not that bad. We're like, oh, we thought we were screwed up, but they're really screwed up. And that really leads me, I think, directly to number 10, which is you're avoiding uncomfortable truths, which is my life, my responsibility, your responsibility to take off the mask. And you know what? People won't like you. People will say that you're crazy. People will say, why'd you give up that job? Why did you give up that relationship? But no one's going to know your truth. That's it. No one is ever going to know your true, beautiful self unless you present it, where you get through that uncomfortable truth of, I guess, telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this, I can never run a business, my business is never going to run the way other people's do. Like, it's just like this constant barrage of worry. And really, at the end of the day, for what? I hope these 10 things have sort of, all I want them to do is just to make you stop and think. Because for me, the one thing that I've recognized in 45 years, I'm like, why did it take me 45 years to realize that I'm actually pretty cool just as it is, and I don't have to pretend to be someone else to actually feel good about myself. So you, whoever you are listening to this, please know that maybe this is a sign to ask yourself, one of these 10 questions. What can you challenge yourself on? Just take that little tiny step into being just a little bit more you. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Dr. Katherine Nisko, and until next time, stay fabulous.